Ashwin, tell us a little bit about what made you start a podcast about the Knicks, obviously, and doing what you've been doing for the last couple of years.
I guess most of the fact was just you spend enough time talking about the fucking team, so might as well just
we're
do
a PG
podcast.
show.
But I was writing about them, and then I was writing at them at a site called Posting and Toasting, and the editor of the site, Joe Flynn, asked us if anybody would want to do a podcast. I volunteered, and here we are. Obviously, we started our own website now, kind of moved on to a new thing, but that was it. Really, it's not too complex, but I figure spend most of the day thinking about how this dog shit team could be better. So might as well talk about it with other people.
Absolutely. By the way, as you know, we are talking to Strictly Knicks podcast host, second staff writer, Ashwin Ramnath. Now, so why don't we get into the Knicks, because they are something to not talk about. I mean, if I was trying to pick up dog poop on the ground, it definitely wouldn't be anything with the Knicks. That's for damn sure. I'd rather pick up something besides being a New York Knicks fan. So tell us a little. Hold on 1 second. We're talking about the Knicks. We're not talking about the Jets, you idiot. This is basketball.
Well, sorry.
Anyways, what are your thoughts this year with Tom Thibodeau almost having a heart attack? Just this team as a whole. You bring in Kemba Walker. You bring in Fournier. You look at this team. I mean, there's really nothing, fun to talk about with this team. I think this has been one of the most embarrassing teams of the last couple of years. And that's not saying much when you talk about this, the Knicks teams that we've seen. I know you're going to say the record doesn't really show how embarrassing they are, but this is not a good team. If this team somehow sneaks into the playoffs, it's a first-round knockout. What are your thoughts to this team?
My thoughts of this team are probably that they're pretty disappointing, but I don't think that the situation is that hopeless. I think it seems that way in part because of how Tom Thibodeau is managing rotations. Not to say that if he managed them, the team would be eminently more successful, but they might be more fun. They might be a little bit more watchable. They might be giving you more cause for optimism. He's ridden his vets pretty hard at weird times. He's played veterans out of position over young players. I would hate to put all the blame on him because, look, Julius Randle was awesome last year and he struggled a lot this year. So, even if you want to say some of that is on Tibbs, that is what it is. But when your star sucks, there's only so much you can do. So you're talking about rearranging a bunch of shit that, who knows? There's also been a lot of issues with COVID and all this kind of stuff. So not a lot of continuity in a lot of situations, but look, flat out, the two big signings they made were Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier. Kemba's had injury issues, has not hit the ground running. He did have a really nice Player of the Week award a couple weeks ago. But look, that was after he sat out for a month, came out firing for a week. It was great. And he played 2 more games after that, got hurt again. He's been out since then. We'll see when he gets back. Fournier has not been a good fit. I have a little bit of sympathy for him because he's not, you use him like you used Reggie Bullock. They're not the same player. It's kind of a weird thing. It would be like, signing shit. I'm trying to think you sign a speed back and you have him run between the tackles. It doesn't really make sense. Is some of that his fault? Sure. Yeah. Some of that is his fault, but you're not putting him in a position to succeed, and he's also exacerbating the situation because he's sucking at the things you're asking him to do. And then, also his defense hasn't been good. It's a lot of shit going on. So there's a lot of blame to go around, but I think the main thing is, your key players haven't been good. Thibodeau's not pushing the right buttons. And then the 2 guys you signed to kind of give your offense a little bit more of a jolt haven't really done it.
So a lot of it has been made about Tom Thibodeau in the past overworking his players, especially with starters. And we saw that with the Knicks in the beginning of the season in particular, where they had an average of almost 40 minutes per play to combine with their starting rotation than any other team in the league. And for a team that, like the Knicks, that had a good offseason, we thought on paper, that was supposed to have this kind of depth, are you surprised he couldn't make that kind of adjustment? And are you worried about the Knicks because of that long term with this current core, no matter who they end up keeping and not letting go of?
Not really. I mean, I'm not worried about them long term. I actually am pretty optimistic about them long term. I like the young guys they have. Do they have a star young player? Maybe not. Maybe not. But I think the young guys they do have, they're all good players. I think RJ Barrett's probably a starter in this league at minimum long term. I think Obi Toppin's a solid rotation player. I think Quickly's a solid rotation player. I like the guys they drafted this year who haven't gotten a lot of burn, but they look pretty good. Grimes had a 27-point game a few weeks ago against the Bucks. Deuce McBride has had a couple of good games. Like, he hasn't played much. They haven't played much, so you can't really say too much about them. But I like their young guys, and I think Julius will get better. Is he going to be all NBA, all star like he was last year? No, probably not. But they're not paying him like that either. He's got like the 40th highest paid contract or something like that in the NBA. So you're not really paying him at that level. So I don't know. I think sometimes the assessment of him is a little out of whack. That said, I thought Tibbs would adjust a little bit in terms of, look, he likes to have his 5-man starting group and his 5-man bench group. That's been his thing for a while. He did that a lot last year. And look, the bench has been awesome. The Knicks' bench is one of the best benches in the NBA statistically by any measure. But it's probably not a good thing if every single night your starters get their asses kicked and your bench comes in and kicks ass. It's probably a little bit more balance that needs to go on in your roster, whether that's staggering lineups more, switching things up. And look, he did try some things. He's benched Mitchell Robinson to kind of give him a kick in the ass and started Nerlens Noel for a bit. And Mitch has responded a little bit better. So maybe that'll have a good outcome at the end. He tried benching Kemba and starting Burks at point guard. I didn't love that idea. I mean, I thought benching Kemba was actually the right move. I didn't like starting Burks in his place, but that is what it is. Tibbs he's a weird guy. Like he's not a bad coach. He understands the game. I don't think he's like a dinosaur. I don't think he doesn't understand the modern NBA. But like as far as overworking players, I mean, looking at the Knicks' minutes, really the only guy he rides like that is Randle. I mean, other than that, everybody else's minutes. I mean, RJ's minutes are down from last year. He's playing 31. I would imagine, without looking, I feel pretty confident in saying that he's probably the second highest on average on the roster, and Randall's probably clearly number one. So other than that, I'm not really worried about him overworking guys this year, but like I do worry about his ability to get the best out of this roster because, I don't think this roster is like – I didn't expect it to be a title contender or anything like that. But I do think they should be better than they are. And even with, Julius struggling, even with RJ having an up and down year, I do think that they've left a bunch on the table. They have 2 losses to Orlando, inexplicable losses to Orlando at home. They have a lot of just like losses that are bad. I mean, they're just really, really bad losses that don't even make sense. And a lot of them, if you look at them, literally, I mean, you can look at the Knicks box scores for the first however many games they played. I think they played 38 games now, 18 and 20. If you go look at each one, you go look at the plus minus column, you will see consistently the starters are minuses and the benches are huge pluses. And that bears out every single game. So I don't think he's pushed the right buttons. I think he's been a little too patient with the starting unit and trying to get it going. I think he's not done a good job staggering between lineups, which has been weird. I mean, I guess like my thing with Tibbs is I was never sure he was the guy, but I do think he is good at establishing a foundation. And to some extent, he's probably a little bit a victim of his own success last year.
So while we're talking about Tibbs, we obviously see, with Chicago and then going to Minnesota, the Jimmy Butler experiences were a little bit different. Obviously, Jimmy Butler in Minnesota didn't work out at all. Surprise, surprise. Now, obviously, Tom Thibodeau has his guys who, once he clicks with them, they click, and that's it. And he's a very, what's a good word? You get sick of him fast. So do you think that Tom Thibodeau is kind of losing the team a little bit, and that's why he's not pressing the buttons? Or do you think Tibbs is just kind of, I don't want to say arrogant, but being arrogant, thinking that it'll just go the way he expects it to go?
Yeah, I wouldn't say arrogant. I know what you're saying. I think it's more like, it's more stubborn than arrogance. I do worry about it a little bit. We've talked about it a bunch on our pod, and we have a Discord. We talk about it in there all the time. I do think that I don't think he's lost the team or anything like that. But I do think that he is not. Look, I think he's a guy who he's very rigid. The way he coaches is very rigid. He expects player A to do this. He expects player B to do this. Everybody has their specific roles and they have to do those things. And if you do those things and you buy into doing those things, you will have success. That is that's what he believes. And we have proof of it based on last year. Their defense was a lot better last year, right? And that's because they had complete buy-in. You had less offensive talent. So it's probably easier for those guys to buy into, it's easier to get Reggie Bullock to be like, hey, you're going to touch the ball 12 times and all we want you to do is shoot threes or keep the ball moving. That's it. That's all you can do. It's a lot harder to do that with Evan Fournier, who's a more skilled offensive player, who's had years being a scorer in the NBA. Not like an all-star, obviously, or even the level below that, but he's been a solid starter in the NBA for a few years, right? This guy started on multiple playoff teams in Orlando. Not great playoff teams, but they were playoff teams. It's harder to get these guys to buy into the type of very specific schematic role. And not just that, you limit this guy's offensive usage. How does he respond defensively? Is he going to give you the same effort that a Reggie Bullock would? Probably not, because Reggie Bullock doesn't have those expectations. RJ Barrett's defensive attention has dipped a little bit because, look, he had a really good second year. You come back, he worked on his game, obviously. I think he's expecting a bigger role offensively. And why wouldn't you? Right? Hey, look, I helped this team win 41 games last year when nobody thought we would. We got home court when nobody thought we would. I'm a third-year player. I was drafted number 3 overall. This is my year to score 20 a game now or whatever it is. And that hasn't happened. Because of injury the last 3 or 4 games, all of a sudden you've put the ball in RJ Barrett's hand again, and all of a sudden he's getting to the basket more. He's getting to the foul line more. You're starting to see kind of what you would want to see from him in year 3. Whereas for the most part, for the start of the year, he's just a spot-up shooter almost for long stretches of games. You're just having him spot up in the corners, spot up beyond the arc, and space the floor. I think a guy like Emmanuel Quickley, you're sending him weird messages where, he was a really good bench player for you last year. He's been awesome as a bench player again this year. But when you're shorthanded, and even though he's played point guard, you don't start him at point guard. You start Deuce McBride, a rookie who never starts. You start him at point guard over him because you want to keep your bench together. That's weird logic. And then when that doesn't work, you start Alec Burks, who's not a point guard, at point guard. I don't know what message that sends to him. What does that say? You're basically signaling to him, hey, I don't think you're a point guard. And really, there's no scenario where I'm going to start you at point guard. I don't know what message. That's a weird message to send to him. Obi Toppin's been really, really good this year when he's played. The problem is he's barely played because Tibbs only plays him when Randle's not on the floor. I would venture to guess 90% of his minutes are strictly when Randle's not on the floor. He's his backup. That's how he views him. He very rarely plays them together, even though we're in an NBA where, I'm watching the Hornets today. They got P.J. Washington playing the fucking 5. P.J. Washington is smaller than Julius Randle and Obi Toppin. So I don't know. I'm not sure what all of these things say, but has he lost the team? I don't think so, but I do think there's something to what you asked, it's hard to keep giving the same effort when you're not sure you're going to be rewarded for improved performance or play or anything. And that I think has definitely been an issue for some of the guys on this team this year.
As you guys know, we are talking to Strickland Knicks podcast host and second staff writer Ashwin Ramnath. Last question for me, Ashwin, and we're gonna go off the Knicks because there's a lot of people. We had another Knick guy, and he got into the Knicks, and there's really nothing to talk about besides the Knicks need to start playing. They play like dog crap, and this team needs to figure out who they are individually. They need to find out what player and what top 5 should be starters, and why is their bench better than their starters? That to me, I think Julius Randle is overrated. I know a lot of people like Julius Randle. He's the airball king. I mean, you see at least the last 3 or 4 games that I've seen Julius Randle play, I've seen at least 2 or 3 airballs in one game. So I understand that Thibodeau loves him. I understand that Thibodeau has this infatuation with him, but he's not a second option on this team. He shouldn't be a first option. He's a second option on this team. On a good team, he's a third option. So I don't know this love fest for Julius Randle.